Hey, I'm back in the garage to continue my review of Steinjager's 4-inch lip kit. Um, if you saw my last video, you saw the response about the cracks in the upper front of control arms. They said those weren't cracks. The reason that they were separated, I'll show them to you again. The reason they were separated here, okay, as you can see, is because this was their explanation, was in order to do a 360-degree weld, the head on this would have had to have been bigger than the tube. See, because if they would have welded there, it would have interfered with the bushing. Okay, well, I actually think that makes sense, except the fact that why would you want to create a structure that's prone to have these cracks? Because mine was full of water. Okay, I don't want my control arms full of water. They'll rust from the inside out. Now, they didn't do the same thing here. Okay, on these, they put on a bigger head so they could make a 360-degree weld. So anyway, we're over that. I would have just let this go if it wasn't for. I would have just let this go if it wasn't for their response, and then the fact that they tried to blame me. Saying I must have done too hard of off-roading and it's beyond what it's capable of. And I'm like, well, there's no warning saying if you buy this lip kit, don't off-road. That's basically what they're saying, is that this can't even handle the weight of the Jeep in which it's manufactured for. So we're moving on to the front track bar. What I noticed right away is these bushings. Here, let me go down a little bit. These bushings actually held up a little bit better than the other ones. Now, it did round off the edge, just like all the other ones. So these ones were pretty flush to begin with. These bushings, this particular bushing held up a little bit better. On the other one, this was the frame and yeah, the frame end, and this was the frame end, this was the axle end. But this end held up a little bit better than the top end. But one thing I did notice is if this is a lock nut, right? So that nut won't move, but okay, it's supposed to be locked in place there, and it's not supposed to move, but it does. This structure turns despite the fact that this is locked in place. Why? I'll show you why. It's because after that nut was locked in place, okay, let me get zoomed in here. After that nut was locked in place, this here compacted and pressed in. As you can see, the sharp metal edge sticking up. Let me see if I can get you a view of it. Okay, that's kind of hard to see. Let me see. Okay, there you can kind of see it right there. See how this has created an edge right here? Well, the metal's pushed up right here. It's made an edge. What that did was, when this was, let's put you back on the desk. These controls are backwards. So you can see where this metal was pressed in, and it was pressed so hard that it pushed up, okay, creating like a real sharp edge. What that did was, since this metal wasn't strong enough to hold the weight of the truck, it pressed it in to the point where it no longer. It pressed it into the point where the lock nut no longer mattered, because even though this lock nut is completely locked on, it pressed the metal and then loosened this up because it created space between there. I'm sure you can understand that. And if you look right down here, okay, you can see where the metal lip is. That's from being compressed because it just can't stand up to the weight. Okay, so that was that end. So this just unscrewed. The lock nut doesn't even work once it's pressed in. And then for the other end, this end held up okay. These bushings held up better than the other bushings. Still pretty rounded off. But all in all, these bushings were better. But just like the track bar, I mean, just like the upper control arms, because they had the same type of weld on them. Come on, hang on. Because they had the same type of weld, once again, stress crack. Now, they're going to argue, here's their law, argue that the reason they didn't create a 360-degree weld was because it would have interfered with the bushing on here. And the linear, they can get just as much lineage out of 2 welds as they could have out of a 360-degree weld. What that's basically justifying is putting this little tiny head on top of here, because to fix 2 pieces together, one end has to be larger than the other. Otherwise, you can only make 2 welds for this particular one, because it's going to interrupt the bushing right here. So all in all, this thing, it did crumble here. You can see the sharp edges. The lock nut didn't work, so it did this even after it was locked in. But I mean, other than that, I think the bushings in this one and the track bars held up better. I would just be, if I were to buy this, I would be cautious and aware that there is only a 180-degree weld on here, and because of that, it has caused cracking, or what they would call intentional. They're basically calling this intentional. If you want to buy something that intentionally cracks open because they don't want to do a 360-degree weld when all they had to do was put a bigger head on here than the pipe, then that's on you. But just know they'll fill up with water, because all of my stuff was full of water that had those cracks in it, or whatever they call it. So I'm going to get to the rear, take the rear track bar off. If you haven't seen the other videos, I think I'll do one final one to just go over a quick review of everything that has happened with them. I can point it out to you how Metal Cloak did it. Okay, Metal Cloak did a 360-degree weld all the way around. How did they achieve this? By putting a bigger head on it. That's it. That's simple. Steinjager is just trying to justify the fact that the heads on these, I mean, look at them. They're so small, they peel apart, and they crack. So I'll do another video when I do the rear track bar. I want to check that one out. I haven't taken it off yet. So, oh, and I'll do one for the coils. So thanks for checking it out, and stay tuned. And don't forget, as always, Steinjager is trash.